All right, hey guys, so our next big project is going to be on this Forester XT. A guy bought the car from us quite a while ago, and he's just been holding off, waiting to see if he can get orders to take the car to his next duty station, and he got the orders to stay here in Japan, so pretty awesome. He wanted to go with the EJ207, but the market has just really driven up the price, and they've gotten really expensive, around 8,000 USD for an engine, an EJ207. So we really convinced him to stay with the EJ205. It already has AVCS and flows really well. We've had really good results with the EJ205. We are pretty much duplicating a build that we've already done in a merged GC8. Only thing that's different is he's got a humongous top mount intercooler rather than the front mount intercooler that the other guy was running. And if you haven't seen that video, we have it on our Instagram already. It's a featured video with the white GC8 with red wheels. So in this build, we're going with the Tomei unequal length headers. He wanted to go unequal length to keep the boxer sound. 1.5 XTR turbo made by Bloushe. ID 1050X injectors. He went with HKS sequential blow-off valve, aftermarket fuel pump. And he's got a ginormous front mount, like I had mentioned, made by Grimm. One of these really nice, really thick core intercoolers. Going to do really well to hold the power. Speaking of holding the power, he decided to go with the ACT clutch. So he doesn't like the twin plate sound. The ACT he actually contacted IAG and asked which clutch would be best for the power goals that he was looking to achieve, and they recommended that clutch, and so we're going to install that. All right, so I kind of jumped the gun and started working on this car, but now I was reminded that I want to keep you in the loop. So Forester XT, just to recap, Forester XT, it had a tune on it from Zero Sports, and the guy had already done quite a bit to it to include a top mount intercooler that was pretty ginormous and the COBB intake. So he also, so we're going to pull the engine on this car. There's so much that's going to be going onto the engine and nothing really going transmission back. So we're going to pull the engine, install the clutch, inlet, fuel injectors, fuel pump. I guess that's going behind, but fuel pump, and the turbo. Yeah, the main thing. So we're going to install all of that on this engine, and it's pretty simple. We have to remove the engine. So if you think logically, everything around the engine has to come off. The radiator's got to come out. The downpipe and everything that's connected to the back side of the engine will come out, and everything on the sides. It's pretty simple. And this is just a really quick recap, and just letting you know what we're going to be doing. So we'll try and keep you updated, and just I'll bring you along the way as we remove everything. Just show you how we do it here. Alright, we got the engine hoist in place. Gonna just kind of go over what was taken apart. Remember I said that all four sides had to be kind of disconnected from the engine. And there's 5 sides because there's one on the bottom too, where the 2 bolts that go into the subframe holds the engine to it, the engine mounts. So in front, it's the radiator. And then the accessories, right? The AC compressor's over there. Alternator comes off, and then the power steering lays to the side. On the side, you have to take the power steering lines out from underneath the expansion tank. You have 2 connectors here, one for the actual engine harness and one for the O2 sensor. Disconnect those. On the back side, you have the downpipe and all the bolts around the bell housing. You have the pitch mount. You have to remove the fork also. So there's 2 ways to do it, right? You can take the boot out and go through with a long screwdriver and take the draw bearing out of the C-clip, but what we do is completely take the pin out. You show them the pin? Like
pressure plate, right? Not a C-clip.
Yeah, and the pin comes out of the fork, and the fork lifts up so it separates easier. From the other side, you have the main harness on the side. You have these two connectors that goes to the main harness. We take the battery out of the reservoir just for ease. You have all the fuel lines, 3 fuel lines. The supply, return, vacuum. Then you have the 2 heater core hoses, heater core hoses. Of course, you have the intercooler and all that when it's on. That's already was off. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's that easy, guys. I don't know how long that time lapse was, but in real time it was like 20 minutes, something like that. It's pretty simple. And so we will, yeah, go back to the time lapse for removal of the engine. Next up is we're going to take this screwdriver right here. This is the one we normally use. It's got a side on it where you can hit it with a hammer. It's decent size, if you can see that with my finger. I got medium-sized fingers. Yeah, we'll just do it right now. Kevin, go ahead. Let's do it. Real time. Just like that. Normally they come apart really easy if the clutch has been messed with in its lifetime, but this one took a little bit. So yeah, he's just gonna take and separate on either side of the bell housing. On each side there's a dowel pin, and so driving this screwdriver down until it hits the dowel pin is normally the approach that we take, and that just separates the engine from the transmission a lot easier. And then the way we have it hooked up for the actual chain to lift it out is we connected one where the 12 mil is that goes to the intercooler bracket, and the other one we put where the AC bolts up to, and so it's pretty centered. And so yeah, we right now, yeah, he's jacking it up. We're gonna put a jack underneath the transmission to hold it, and then we'll just pull back on the engine, and it'll separate from the transmission. We'll jack it out. All right, so from the last video till right now, literally just put a jack underneath the transmission right there, just lift it up, just to help with keeping everything level, pretty much square, and then just pull right off. I mean, it's that simple. Yeah, here's the dowel pin I was mentioning earlier, right there. And then what we do is we hang the accessories. We just hang them so there's no real tension on any of the hoses or lines while we're prepping the engine. It's pretty clean. This would be a good time to replace any seals on your power steering if they were leaking, your rack, any of that good stuff. Is really a good time to do it when the engine's out. If you wanted to clean the engine bay and paint it and all that kind of stuff, this would be a good time. But here it is. Here's the engine in all of its stock glory. It's going to look completely different. Different clutch, different headers, different turbo, different injectors, different spark plugs that you won't really see. Yeah. Now that the engine's out, we'll start breaking it down. First things first, we're going to take off the clutch. It's 6 12 mil bolts, and then after the pressure plate and clutch disc comes out, behind it is the actual flywheel bolts. It's 8 14 millimeter bolts. We'll take that out and replace the remaining seal while we have everything apart. Then we'll take the turbo off and the headers. All very simple stuff, a lot of 14s, and that's why I love Subarus. 14s, 12s, 17s here and there, but pretty much 14 and 12 will get this whole thing apart. There's some 10s here and there too. But yeah, the headers will come off. The turbo will come off. We'll take the timing belt cover off too, check this timing belt while we're here. So much easier to replace when the engine's out. We'll take off these bad boys. These are real ridiculous. They do help. They have brackets for like holding the expansion tank and everything on, but taking those off will help us get to the injectors a lot easier. Take those off. Take the intake manifold off to get to the inlet. We might not. We might leave them on. It might be better just to leave them on. And then because with the turbo out, it'd be easy to slide the inlet in. All right, just an update. So Kevin right now is taking the turbo off. And something really important to pay attention to is that the turbo oil supply line, you have to double wrench it to come off. So the bottom portion that's connected to the AVCS supply line, you don't want to mess around and twist that. Start that car up, it's going to be spraying all over the place. Ask us how we know. Yeah. So here the clutch is off right here. You can see the back of the crankshaft. There's a rear main seal. One of those seals you don't want to leak. Don't want to leak. Once it does, you got to remove transmission or remove the engine to replace it. Real simple to replace. This back here, this cover right here too, it leaks often on the GC8s because it's plastic and cracks. The ones that are metal, they tend to do a lot better. Also got the headers off. I've removed the headers already. Here's the stock exhaust manifold right here with the up pipe. It wasn't leaking, so it can be reused on another vehicle. Up pipes, One of those things when they start leaking, they're a pain. Yeah, next up after the turbo comes off, I'm gonna remove the time belt cover and see what time belt's looking like. One of the many cars that drive by saying, "What's up?" All right, we got Kevin trying to set some world records by removing parts. Turbo is out. Inlet is about to come out right now. Go ahead, Kevin.
So yeah, basically everything that's going to possibly catch onto something, you just break off. This inlet's not going to go back in anyways. The hardest part really is the blow-off valve. The Subarus have a return line that goes towards the back side. If you look right here, the actual return line comes into the inlet, and we just cut it off completely. All right, and then you can just literally pull it out.
All right, you pulled it out right now. All right, here it is.
So you have this part is cut. These all break off easily, and then you just pull it out. It makes it a lot easier with the engine out, simply because the power steering is already off, and then in our case the turbo also. But
so we also took the timing cover off, check everything out. We can't recall if the time belt was replaced on it or when it was replaced on it, but the time belt and the kit looks really good. The time belt still has the marks on it from when you purchased it brand new. Everything looks really good. We put it in time. Everything's lining up really well. And so we're going to leave it as is. For the spark plugs, next up we're putting in a new set of spark plugs. The EJ205s come stock with BKR6s. A lot of people recommend putting in one-step coater, so the BKR7s, which come in the GDBs, like the STI models. And so yeah, that's what we're throwing in. And yeah, stay tuned. Okay, continuing on, we're going to start the assembly. And so normally I try to remind myself almost every time I start a job, start with the hardest first and work easy. That way by the time it's over, you're not really frustrated. You're working the easiest one, so you end on a good note. But in this case, I want to see some good progress, so I want to install the clutch and the headers first. So the clutch, he went with the ACT Street Light. That's the part number right there for the lightweight flywheel, pressure plate, and the clutch. And then he went with the Tomei unequal length headers. Everything's going to bolt up quite easy. It's got all the hardware and the new gaskets for the headers. We're going to bolt all this on. This is starting with the easy part. Then we'll be doing the inlet and the turbo, and then the hardest will be the injectors. We'll end with the injectors. That'll be the last thing that we do before we throw the engine back in. The stock turbo is small enough to run with this AVCS oil supply line right here, but with the bigger turbo it hits this, so you need to buy an aftermarket kit that just relocates this AVCS supply line to the turbo that way, or the oil's supply line to the turbo, so that it's not hitting it. And so we'll show you that process too. Everything else is pretty simple, bolt on. There's a lot of videos out there about it, and we'll show you how we do it if there's anything special that we do, but all pretty straightforward. But we'll stop and show you this because that's pretty important. All right, like I was stating, I wanted to try and do the easiest first, so we went with the headers, and then come to find out, I don't know if you can see that right there,
the Forester manual engines have this different adapter,
slanted,
and it's slanted because the Forester headers are so close to the actual oil cooler. But now it's actually doing an opposite effect where it's actually hitting the aftermarket headers. So one thing we could do is actually remove the angled piece so it's straight up, and it'll bring everything up and kind of get out the way there. We had to do an oil change anyways on it, so I guess we might as well do that now.
Alright, so that video that I was making earlier showing how everything was going so easily turned into a fiasco of finding parts and figuring out fixes and solutions. So the headers went on, right? This is an engine out of a Forester. There are a few differences in the EJ205 all the way to the point of the coolant spout on top of the engine is angled versus the EJ205s and the WRXs that are straight on. And so one of the issues that we ran into, as you saw, was the headers hitting the oil cooler. And this is what it looked like. It was angled like this, so it was screwed to the block, and it was angled down like that, and then had the oil cooler that's actually pretty short, if you can see that, and this was the portion that was hitting the headers. And so what we had to do is we had to figure out a solution. And so I first tried to remove this component and bolt the oil cooler directly to the block. Of course, that's not going to work because now without this little bit of space, this pipe hits the block. And so, all right, well, what could I do next? We had a few junk engines hanging around. Now I took one from a 20K, so out of a EJ 20K, out of a GC8, and it is longer. So the actual oil cooler is longer, puts it down further, and creates all kinds of clearance. So if you can see that, I can put my hand there before you couldn't. I can put my hand here now, plenty of space for the headers to bolt on. So now that we have the headers on, we can proceed with all the other things. Now we have the headers on, we'll do the up pipe turbo inlet injectors. Yee.
Hello there, from Okinawa, Japan, home of OkiSubies. Today, we're going to continue on with Cory's build. Dylan did all the easy stuff.
Start with the hardest first and work easy. But in this case, I want to see some good progress, so I want to install the clutch and the headers first.
Now for all the hard stuff, he threw onto my resting table here. So we have the injectors. We were going to be using the actual crimping method, right? Not the plug and play harness. We're actually going to crimp these. Welcome to Okinawa, Japan. We're going to crimp these into his OEM harness so that they plug right into the ID 1050X injectors. These are injector dynamics right here. Just a side note right now, we might just do kind of like a time lapse for the install, so I'm just going to say it right now. We have in the past seen people and even done WD-40 on these as you're putting them. Don't do it when you remove them. It just dries out the O-rings. What you want to use is an actual silicone spray. For those who don't know the katakana, it says it right there, huh? Silicone lube spray. This is actually going to lube the O-rings and slides these a lot easier in. So we'll have the injectors. As Dylan mentioned, the torque solution AVCS to turbo feed lines also. This right here, I'm going to actually show you the way that we've angled them. Even if you look online, a lot of people have had issues installing these with the aftermarket turbo, but they're all just fittings. If you find a way that works, right, angling them the proper way and they're not leaking, then that's obviously okay. We'll show you later on how we actually do that. And then, of course, the turbo in itself will go on with the up pipe. That'll be pretty straightforward after the AVCS lines are done. And then today we have the Mishimoto Inlet also. So we'll be installing that also there. He went with the 2.5 inch compressor housing or inlet bore, whatever you want to call it, which is good. When you do the 3-inch, with this setup right here, you actually, with this portion, with the 3-inch, you actually start hitting that. We've seen people have to cut that and kind of trim this down because of the TGV housing. This one doesn't have TGVs, which is great. The Foresters just don't come with them, similar to the STIs. But if you had like a version 8-9 manifold, like the one-piece manifold, then 3-inch works really well. But for this one right here, really glad that he went with the 2.5 just for that. Performance, obviously 3-inch would have been better, but for his goals and his build, the 2.5 should still perform great. So still running the stock EJ205 engine platform. So obviously we're not going to try to push that too much. Still open deck, and the heads are still just the EJ205 AVCS, but not the STI heads or anything like that. When it comes to revving, I think they're still just revving out to like 7,500, 7,000-ish. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and start installing all this stuff and kind of show you how we do it. All right, so what we're going to do first is the injectors here. We have to remove all the harness here, just unplugging everything and then peeling it back. And then the fuel rails, we just remove those, lift that up, and then get access to the actual injectors on the bottom. So we'll go ahead and do that. So now that we've unbolted the fuel rails and we've unplugged all the different connectors and lifted up the fuel rails, let the fuel pour out. Smells good. It's Japanese Hayoku. Maybe it was Kadena Premium. The Hayoku is, so you have Regira, which is regular, and then you have the Hayoku. And you cannot run base gas or regular in these engines for the EJs. They are tuned to the Hayoku, the premium stuff. If anyone has ever installed something like this before and you lose something like that, you know the headache right there. Look at that. Thank you, Subaru seats. We can slide them up on top first. Inside the fuel rail. And you want to try to get them straight in as much as possible. And it just kind of clicks just like that. In Germany, it's the good old good and tight.
Those are not real German words, guys.
I know. Okay, so we're back here. We've got the turbo on. Surprising, we didn't have to actually do the AVCS line, the aftermarket one from Torque Solutions. The stuff that came with Bloushe actually worked. It was just an adapter on the OEM stuff. You can actually carefully bend that out the way and get that to fit, so that's a pleasant surprise. That'll save the customer some money right there. He doesn't have to buy that extra kit. We had it in stock, so no obligation for him to purchase it. We slid the Mishimoto Inlet through. It was really easy. We didn't really even record that. The last part where you're trying to get this onto the turbo is really where it's most difficult. We have one of them, I don't know what it's called, little L funky shaped tools where you can kind of just pull it through and get the inlet on. We didn't have it, so we kind of had to struggle with it a little bit more, but took the coolant line back off so I can get to this bolt. This nut actually will not work with just like an OEM one. What I'll probably do is I'll probably grind one side off just to get it past this lip. Yeah, so if you loosen it up, that bottom gap gets farther to the top because only the bottom of it was catching on. So if you lift it up, you give this all this little extra groove comes up higher so you can get this lip underneath it. Okay, so we pretty much have it all back together. AVCS line, the coolant in, out. We now properly have the return line as it's supposed to be. Do yourself a favor and just check it beforehand. My intentions were to obviously check it, but my main focus was on this AVCS line. I was wondering if I can actually use the OEM stuff. If I wasn't gonna be able to use the OEM AVCS and oil feed line, I would have had to remove the turbo, and then I would have had to remove the entire AVCS line. So I didn't want to kind of like get it fully installed without knowing it's actually going to work. So everything looks good. Inlet's in. Oh, stuck. There you go. Inlet's in. And yeah, the turbo's in. Everything, injectors are in. We'll do like a map, but this right here, the 4-bar map sensor is real simple. We could do that even with the engine in the car. The return line for the blow-off valve is back to the actual OEM inlet. And then this right here, we have some PCV, positive crankcase ventilation. Yeah, PCV lines that we'll have to kind of set up. But yeah, it's pretty much it. Real smooth. We'll go ahead and get it in the car and run a base map and go from there. Alright, so we're back here with Cory's Forester XT build. We got everything all put back together. The coolant is in there, it's bled. We did the oil change. few things that you could see that are different right away, right? So we put the 4-bar map sensor in there. We have a boost control solenoid. Now it's an aftermarket boost control solenoid. He had an aftermarket alternator and the Grimm speed intercooler. The turbo's done, the headers, the inlet, intakes back in there, injectors, and everything is all good to go. So now what we're going to be doing is we've already uploaded the map, the base map, and we're going to make sure that the AFRs and everything is good, the idling is good, and just do some basic data logs for him and make sure that it's running properly. But the clutch is brand new also. So he has to do a 500 kilometer break-in before we can actually get to tuning the vehicle. So we're gonna data log it, make sure everything's good. Cory's gonna come pick it up, and then we'll actually start a new series on the tuning process. Obviously, we won't be able to teach you exactly how to tune. It would be too much. But we'll be able to tell you what programs we use, the method that we use, and how to actually upload the maps. And at least by the end of that series, you'll be able to do something like an e-tune if you have a 16-bit ECU, which is like 2,000 in Japan, so bug eye and up. If you have a GC8, you're gonna have to get some type of aftermarket ECU, Power FC, or hopefully you don't do that, but something like a Haltech or a Link ECU. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It'll be fun when we start getting into the tuning, so stay tuned for that. We'll actually be able to see, you know, the butt dyno on how much power is going to be making, because we don't have a dyno in Okinawa. So, but yeah, that's it for Cory's build. Here it is.